we know how to create columns, grid columns, and grid row size. We know how to create grid container, grid columns, and grid rows. Okay, and we were able to design some of the UI, right? So in yesterday's session, we were able to build something like this. I just go to this Ashok IT platform. So this part, similar to this part, we were able to build. Okay, this is what the UI we tried to create in a last session using our grid concept. Okay. Now, if you remember what we used to do, what we have done in last session, basically we have created one grid container like this. Okay. Inside that grid container, we have created some number of rows like this. And we have created some columns. Like this, we were able to create rows and columns at same time using grid concept. Now, if you see, there are some lines right here. Whenever I create one container, in that if I create some rows and columns, then here you are finding some lines, right? This is one line, this is one line, this is one line. We have one more line here. In the same way, we have lines here, right? So in grid, all these lines are called grid lines. All these lines are called grid lines. So whatever lines you are seeing here, this line, this entire line, this entire line, this entire line, this entire line, all this we are going to call as a grid lines. And all these grid lines are imaginary lines. We are going to call this as the imaginary lines. Imaginary lines means by seeing the screen, we are not able to identify we have that lines, but logically we are believing that we have some lines here. Whenever we create some columns and rows, we got some lines, and that lines we are going to call as a grid lines. And all those grid lines are imaginary lines. Now we have lines in the column direction also. Nothing but we have grid column lines or column grid lines. And we have row grid lines also. Okay. Now column grid lines number will start from here. Okay. So we are going to consider this grid line as a column grid line. This is a column grid line. This is a column grid line. This is a column grid line. So whatever container I have drawn, if I go for this container, now in this container, I have totally 4 column grid lines. How many? 4. So the number will start from the left side. This is 1. This is 2. This is 3. And 4. 3. And this one is 4. Okay, this entire line from here to here, this entire line we are going to call as a column grid line 1, column grid line 2, column grid line 3, column grid line 4. In the same way, when it comes to row grid lines, this entire line from here to here, this we are going to call as a row grid line 1. So row grid lines will start from the top. So this entire thing we are going to call as a row grid line 1. So it will be like 1 only. This one is like row grid line 2. Then this is our 3, this is our 4. So like this, we can have some grid lines whenever we create one grid container, and in that, if we create columns and rows. If you create a grid container, in that if you create a column and rows, then you will get some grid lines. And that grid lines are divided into 2 types. The first type is column grid line. Second one is row grid line. Column grid line will start from the left side, and the count will start from 1 and goes on. And row grid lines will start from the top and goes on. Okay, understood what are the grid lines? Now, these grid lines will be very, very helpful for us. Now, how they are helpful, we will just come to know. Within few minutes, you will come to know why these grid lines are very, very important. So before I go for next set of concept. I just want to make sure you guys understood what are grid lines in grid container. Everybody understood what are row grid lines, what are column grid lines, and how the numbers are allocated. Okay, yeah. Now, if you suppose add gap, let's suppose if you are adding like this gap. Okay, let's consider you have like this container and you created 3 columns and you have gap. If you have gap, this entire thing is considered as a one grid line only. This entire line is considered as one grid line. So here also grid line 1, this entire thing as a grid line 2, this entire thing as a grid line 3, and this as a grid line 4. Okay, so here that gap concept will not do any kind of effect to our grid lines. So grid line concept is same. So now how to identify how many column grid lines we have? How to identify in our container how many grid or column grid lines we have? Column grid lines. Now that depends upon how many columns you are creating. Suppose if you are creating 3 columns, then column grid lines will be 4. If you are creating 5 columns, then your column grid line will be 6. So one value will be more compared to your columns. How many columns you are creating? Based on that columns, we can identify how many grid lines we have. So if you have 3 grid lines, then if you have 3 columns, then you have 4 grid lines. If you have 5 columns, then you have 6 grid lines, column grid lines. Same with the rows also. If you have 3 rows, then you can say you have 4 row grid line. If you have 5 rows, then you can say you have totally 6 row grid lines. So this is how we are going to identify how many grid lines we have. Okay, so column plus 1, row plus 1. Understood how to identify how many column grid lines and how many row grid lines we will have in our grid container. So let's suppose I am creating one container here. Okay, let's suppose I am creating container. To this container, let's suppose I want to add some styles. Like I will add width as a 800 pixel and height something like 400 pixel. And let me add border 2 pixel solid black. Okay, so what I have done, I have taken one container and I have given some CSS property to it. Now, if I save my file and if I open my document in my browser, it looks something like this. So let me bring this container exactly in the center. So for that, I can use margin, something like 50 pixel from top and auto. Now I got here. Now, can I call this as a grid container? Can I call this container as a grid container? Can I call that container as a grid container? No. So until unless you don't assign that display grid, we cannot call that container as a grid container. Now, if I assign this property display colon grid, then only I have to say, I can say that this is a grid container. Now this is a grid container. Okay. Say now inside grid container, how many columns I need to create? That I can decide using grid hyphen template hyphen columns. Suppose here I am saying something like this: 200 pixel, 200 pixel, 200 pixel, 200 pixel. Now, how many columns I have created? How many columns I have created? 4 columns. So how many grid lines I will have? How many column grid lines I will have? I will get yes, you will have 5 column grid lines. Now, if I save my file, if I go back to my browser, are you able to see Any grid lines here? Are you able to see any grid lines? No, that is the reason they are called imaginary lines. It means you have to just imagine that you have some grid lines here. Okay. Now, in the same way, can I create here rows? Now here I am creating something like 100 pixel or something like 200 pixel, 200 pixel. Now how many rows are created? 2 rows. So how many row grid lines I have now? Now as per my requirement, how many column grid lines? You told 5, right? I have total 5. And row grid lines, how many row grid lines I have? 3. Nice. Okay, it means I have created one container like this. In that I created 4 columns. So column 1, column 2, column 3, and 4. And I have created totally 2 rows. So now, as per our understanding, our grid line should start with here. The value of first grid line will be 1. It will be 2. Okay. Here the value will be like 3, 4, 5. Okay. In the same way, when it comes to row grid lines, this entire line is like 1. This entire line is like 2. This entire line is like 3. Now, if you remember, we can create one flex container, right? Inside flex container, if I display some element, what those elements are called? Inside my flex container, if I display some elements, what those elements are called? Flex items, right? Here also the same concept. Inside your grid, if you display some elements here, now these elements are called grid items. These are called grid items. So how many grid items I have now? Grid item 1, grid item 2, grid item 3. Okay, I have now totally 3 grid items. Now I can just add some classes for all the grid items. Like here I will say something like G1, here G2, here G3. Okay. Now if I want, I can add some styles like .G1. Simply I'm adding some background color, something like brown. G2, I will add some background color, something like light coral. .G3, background color, I will add something like light sea green. And here also, let me take green light color only, something like let's add light slate gray. Okay, G1, G2, G3. Now if I go back here, now see grid item 1, grid item 2, grid item 3. Now I just want color to be white, so simply I will add here color property to be white. I got all the white. Okay. Now my requirement is my grid item 1. My grid item 1 should occupy first column. I want my grid item 1 should occupy first column, second column, third column also. My requirement is my grid item 1 should occupy column 1, column 2, column 3, and only one row. Only one row. So how to give the instructions that our grid item 1 should occupy from column 1, column 2, column 3. So that instructions we can give by using these grid lines. Now tell me, my grid item 1 occupying the grid lines from where to where? What is the starting point of my column grid line for grid item 1? It is like 1. My grid item 1 is starting here, right? 1. And where it is ending? It is ending at 4. Okay, you remember starting at 1, ending at 4. So what I will do, simply I will go to my .g1. There is one property called grid column start. So where we have to start, I have to start at 1. Then we have one more property, grid column end, where we have to end at 4. So we are saying that this grid item 1 should start at column 1, end at column 4. Now if I save it, if I go back to my browser, now see, it started at 1, ended at 4. Ended at 4. In the same way, now I have one more grid item, right? That is grid item 2. Now I want my grid item 2 should start at column 4, end at column 5. End at column 5. Okay, that is my requirement. So what I will do, I will go to grid item 2. Simply I will assign grid column start at 4, grid column end at 5. If I say like this, I got like this. Okay, now grid item 3. I want this grid item 3 should occupy this complete space. I want grid item 3 should occupy this complete space. So in that case, tell me what should be my grid column start value? Grid column start value, what should be the grid column start value? Yes, it should be 1. And what should be the grid column end value? Five. Excellent. Now if I go back here, I got it. Now can I remove this border? Now it looks like this. Are we able to create some grid structure? Okay. Now, in the same way, how we are telling for column, we can tell for row also. Let's suppose I have a container like this. Okay. In this container, let's suppose I have created some columns, column 1, column 2, okay, column 3 and 4. I have 4 columns, I have 2 rows. Okay, now again the same, your grid line number will start from left for column. Okay, it will be like 1, here it will be 2, here it will be 3, here it will be 4, here it will be 5. And when it comes to row, the same thing, 1, then here you will have something like 2, here you will have 3. Okay, now my requirement is my first grid item, I want my first grid item should occupy column from 1 to 3 and row 1 to 3. Column 1 to 3 and row also 1 to 3. Like this. My grid item 2, I want it should occupy from 3, 4, 5. When it comes to column grid line, it should start from 3, end at 5. When it comes to row grid line, it should start at 1, it should end at 2. And grid item 3, when it comes to column, it should start at 3, end at 5. And when it comes to row, it should start at 2, it should end at 3. I want this structure. Okay, so can we try? So simply I will copy this code. I will just create one file, task1.html. I will just paste as it is. Okay, now we have to just work on grid column start and end. Here also grid column start and end. Here also grid column start and end. Apart from that, everything is same. Okay. So let me add border at initial stage. So here. Okay. Now grid item 1. As per our understanding, grid item 1. Nothing but grid column grid line should start at 1, end at 3. And in the row, it should start at 1, again it should end at 3. So for grid item 1, grid column start should be at 1, grid column end should be at 3. In the same way for row also, we have a property called grid row start at 1, grid row end should be 3. Okay. Now same thing we have to give for item 2 also. For item 2, grid column start should start at 3, end at 4. And for grid row start at 1, end at 2. Okay. So if you go for grid item 2, column will start at 3, end at 5. Sorry, end at 5, not 4. End at 5. And grid row start. When it comes to row start at 1, end at 2. Now same thing we can give for grid item 3 also. Start at 3, end at 5. But when it comes to row, okay, for grid item 3 will start in the row direction. It will start at 2, end at 3. Start at 2, end at 3. So here grid row start at 2, end at 3. Now if I go back to my browser, now see I got this structure. Now I can remove that border property. Now see I got this structure. First we created like this, now we created like this. Understood how to create the layouts now? Are you able to understand how to create this kind of layouts? Now, if I show and ask you, can you create this kind of layout? What will be your answer? Just now we have created this layout, right? This layout. Okay, this layout we have created. Just little bit width we have to increase. Okay. So here width, I will say something like 1100. If I say 1100, it will be like this. Okay, here we got width as a 1100 pixel. Now here I have to increase the column width also. So can I make this as a 300? Here also 300. It's like 600. Here 250. Here 250. I got something like this. Okay, now I can just add here gap property. I can say 30 pixel. I got something like this. Okay, now here maybe I have taken only 3 columns, not 4 columns. For designing like this, I have taken only 3 columns. Here I am taking 4 columns. That is the reason it is not coming. So here let me just go with the 3 columns way. Okay, if I go with 3 columns, then I think I will be able to create in that structure. Yeah. So before I go, I want to teach one more thing. Now, total width is 1100, guys. Okay. So let me just go back here. Now let's suppose I have created one container like this. Now let's assume that the total width of my container is 1100 pixel. Now what I want to do inside this container, I want to create 3 equal columns. I have to create 3 equal columns. I want to create 3 equal columns. So how to divide your container into 3 equal columns? How to divide your container into 3 equal columns? So the first one way is we have to calculate total width. We have to calculate. Then we have to decide what should be the width of first column, second column, and third column. Right? Maybe you have to divide 1100 by 3. That is one way. Another way is we can use one unit called fraction, FR, something called fraction. So this fraction unit will divide your entire width into 3 equal columns. How it will divide means simply we have to add something like this: 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR. 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR means your entire width will be divided into 3 equal columns. So if I go back here, now suppose I want to create 3 equal columns, simply I will say 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR. FR means fraction. Now if I save it, if I go back, now see, I got that structure. My entire width divided into 3 equal columns. 3 equal columns. Okay, so to understand that, we can take one more example. So here I will just add fr.html. I will just paste the code. I will remove all these grid lines. Okay, now I have taken grid template column as 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR. Now if I just go and load this document in my browser, now let me remove this gap as well. And let me add border. 2 pixel solid red. Now see, your entire container is divided into 3 equal columns. Suppose I just want only one row. So I will just remove this property. Only columns will be created. 3 equal columns. If you add one more FR, now you got 4 equal columns. Column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. If you want, you can just add one more grid item here. Here something like 4. Here also 4. You can just add one CSS property. Here something like 4, and we can just change the color. Grid items. In the same way, you can divide your row also into equal heights. Like I can create grid template rows, and let's suppose I want only 2 rows. So I can say 1 FR, 1 FR. So the total height is 400 pixel. So the first row height will be 200 pixels, second row height will be 200 pixels. It will divide into 2 equal rows. Okay, 2 equal rows. Now see, 2 equal rows. Now suppose if I just go for 3 columns, then one item will come in the next row. Now see the height divided into 2 equal rows. So like this, if you are creating multiple columns with the same value, if you are creating multiple columns with the same value, like 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR, then instead of writing like this 3 times, we have one more way. So let me show that one more way. That is, we can use something called repeat formula. There is one formula called repeat, nothing but one function called repeat. Okay, so here we have to say how many times we want to repeat. I'm saying I want to repeat 3 times. And what should be the size? I want 1 FR. Now if I save it, I got saved. If I say here repeat 4 times, I'm saying that 4 times you have to repeat. What you have to repeat 4 times? 1 FR. Now 4 times 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR has been repeated. So when you can go for this repeat function, if you want to give equal size for your columns or rows, you can go for rows or columns. Okay. Now you can use one more way. In this fraction also, we can give something like this as well. My first column should be 1 FR. I want second column should be 2 FR. 2 FR means my second column is 2 times bigger than first and third column. 2 FR means my second column is 2 times of first and third column. Now see, my second column is twice of first and third column. If you want, you can give something like this also, 3 FR. 3 FR means third column is 3 times of my first column. Second column is 2 times of my first column. Like this. So you can use fraction values, or you can use your percentage unit, or you can use your pixel value unit. You can use any unit. But if you go with fraction, the benefit is like you need not to calculate the total width. Whatever the total width there, it will adjust accordingly. As per your total width, your columns will adjust accordingly. Okay. Yeah. So this is how you have something, this grid template columns, grid template rows, and all this. Now, if you see here we are writing 4 properties, right? Grid column start, grid column end, grid column row start, grid column row end. Instead of writing 4 properties, we can assign same values in 2 properties. There is a shortcut way of writing this column start and column end. So the shortcut way is we can use a property called grid-column. And you have to say the number. You have to start at 1, end at 3. So how to say? /3. So grid column. So this is the grid column start. This is the grid column end. So instead of writing like this 2 properties, you can write these values in 1 property also. And in the same way, grid row. Grid row also you can say start at 1, end at 3. End at 3. So if you go back here, still you have same result. So for this grid item 1, if I say start at 1, end at 2, in the grid row, end at 2. Now see, it is ending at 2. Starting at 1, ending at 2. So however you want, you can give the values. So here I want to say 3. Now see, I got this structure. Now, as per our requirement, I need to add one background image. So simply what I will do, for grid item 1, instead of adding background color, I will add one background image. One background image. So for that, I required one image. So already I have taken the URL. So I will just copy this URL. You can just add any image. I'm just adding one image URL here. Okay. So I have just added one background image URL. Now, if I go back to my browser, it looks something like this. It looks something like this. Now see here, background image is repeating, right? Background image is repeating. So how to stop the repeating of our background image? I don't want to repeat my background image. Yes. So we have to use, what is that property? Background no repeat. Sorry, background hyphen repeat. The value should be no repeat. Now my image got here. Now my image want exactly in the center. I want my image should be exactly in the center. So let me add border just for better understanding. Okay. Now I want here image. What I need to do for that? Yeah. Now this image I want exactly in the center. So for that, we have to give background position. Can I say center? Image will be exactly in the center. Now I want this image should occupy this complete space. Complete space. In that case, I can go with background size. And I can say cover. I got cover. Now image got cover. Now here you are seeing some extra space. Here at the bottom, you are seeing extra space. We generated some extra space. This is because of this gap. Because we have added gap 30 pixel, right? So 30 pixel got generated. Now if I remove that, it will sit exactly inside our content. Okay. So here we got this. Now on the top of this image, I want one black color shadow. On the top of this image, I want one black color shadow like this. I hope you guys remembered how to add black color shadow on the top of our background image while learning that Netflix landing page we have seen, right? Yes. So for that, we have to take one div. Okay, first of all, inside this grid item 1, we have to take one div. Okay, to this div, I will just assign some ID like shadow. I will select this div hash shadow. To that div, first of all, I will give the height as 100%, width 100%, and background color RGBA. So 0, 0, 0, 0.7 or something like 6. If I give 0.6, I got like this. See, now I got black color shadow. Black color shadow I got. Now here we have some content like women fashion, something lorem, and one button. So can we add this content? So inside this div, I am taking one h1, something like women fashion. Okay, then I am adding one paragraph, something like lorem 20. After that, one button. Shop. Okay, what is the name we have added in that button? Shop now. What I did inside this shadow div, I just added 3 elements: h1, paragraph, button. Now if I go back, it looks something like this now. It looks something like this. Now, do you know why we are getting this extra space here? Extra space. Anybody can guess why this extra space got generated? Yes, that is because of due to this h1 and paragraph. We know, right? By default, this h1 and paragraph will have some margin. Okay, if you go for any heading element from h1 to h6 and paragraph element, now all this element by default will have some margin. Now I want to make this margin 0 for all my elements. In my document, how many elements I have? By default, if browser is adding some margin, I want to make all those margin as a 0. I want to consider all the elements. As of now, I have h1, p1. Maybe in future here I will add h2. Maybe somewhere I will add h4. So for all the elements, I want by default margin value should be 0. So how to make all the elements? So should we select all the elements? Answer is no. what we can do, if you want to select all the elements in this page, then simply add asterisk and then open curly brace, close curly brace. Asterisk means you are selecting all the elements in this document. How many elements you have? All the elements. For all the elements, I want margin should be 0. Now this property will be applied for all the elements that I have inside this document, including body, HTML, head, all the elements. Now if I save it, if I go back here, now see that got removed. Okay, now this content I want exactly in the center. This content I want exactly in the center here. So what I need to do? No, text align center means it will come here. On the top only it will be in the center. I want this content exactly in the center here. Here I want. Yes. So in that case, this first grid item we have to convert like a flex container. So whatever our grid item is there, right? Not grid item, basically this shadow we have to convert. This shadow div we have to convert like a flex container, so that all this will be flex items. And once they are flex items, then we can apply the properties like justify content, align items, flex container, or that flex direction, all those. So this shadow div is there, right? Shadow. So this div I want to make like a flex container. And simply I can add justify content center, align item center. Now if I do, they will display like this. Because by default, your flex item will display in the row direction. I want to change the direction. Flex direction should be column. Now they are in the column. Okay. Now I want to generate some space in this H1 for this paragraph and for this button. I want to generate some space between them. Okay. So here, let me remove this border property now. Now we don't require. Now I want to generate this space. How to generate this space? Simply we can select that H1. Now this H1 is inside the shadow, right? So if you want to select this H1 based on this shadow, you can select this H1. How to select H1 based on shadow means, for that simply we have to use like this. Hash shadow. We are saying that in the hash shadow space H1. Now, if you use something like this, what happens means, whatever CSS property you will add, that properties will be applied to H1, which is inside the shadow. If you add some CSS properties, that CSS properties will be applied to H1, which is inside the shadow. Suppose if I have another H1, which is outside the shadow. Suppose here if I have H1. Now whatever CSS property I will add, it will not be applied to this H1. It will be applied to only this H1. Why? Because we have selected this H1. How did we selected this H1? Using this shadow space H1. It means we are saying that apply that CSS property to this H1, which is inside the shadow. Okay. So suppose if I just save it. Now I got here some H1, right? Like this. Now if I just add here color property. If I say color to be red. Now this property will be applied to only that H1 which is inside the shadow. Now see, only this H1 got red color, but this H1 did not get any red color. Okay. So let me remove this part. Now what I want to do, I just want to apply some properties here, like maybe I want to add some margin bottom. Okay, I will just try to add some margin bottom here for H1. Margin bottom. And margin bottom, I will apply something like 25 pixel. And in the same way, I will increase the font size to 52 pixel. So it looks something like this now. It looks something like this. Okay, some 25 pixel space has been generated from the bottom. Now what I want to do, this paragraph, I want to select that paragraph also. So same way I will say hash shadow space paragraph. For this paragraph also, I want to add some margin bottom. Okay, something like maybe this time I will add something like 25 to 35 pixel. Margin bottom 35 pixel maybe. Now I got some space. But if you see, this paragraph is starting here on the left and it is ending here. But our design is something like this. Our paragraph is starting here and ending here. So I want some space here. So how to generate that space means, for that I am following one technique. What is that technique means? This paragraph I will wrap inside one div. And to this div, I will decrease the size. I will add something like this. Width should be something like maybe a 300 pixel I can add. Maybe I can try 300 pixel. Or maybe, okay, let me try 300 pixel. Okay, it looks like this. Instead of 300, can I add 500? It looks like this. Okay, this shadow I will increase. That black color shadow value I will little bit increase. That transparent value I want to increase. So here we have 4, right? 6, right? I will try to give 3. If I give 3, it will be more colored, right? Maybe 7 or 8, like this. Okay, I think 7 is fine. Yeah. Now I want to design button. Now designing button is very easy. The same thing, I will say hash shadow. In that I want to select button. Now for button, we have to add some styles. I need to add some styles for the button. Okay, so I will be adding something like this. For button, first of all, can I remove the border? Or I don't want to remove the border. So first, let me increase the font size, 15 pixel. So my button looks something like this. Font size I have increased. This background color, I want to make transparent. So background color I will add here, RGBA. So 0,0,0 point, something like here. I can assign some value. Maybe I will just add it 0.1. It will be something like this. Border to 1 pixel, solid white, I will say. Sorry, for this we have to add, right? For button, it will be something like this. And I will just make color. Color also we can make white. We got something like this, and we can increase the padding. So from top bottom, I want to apply something like 13 pixel. And from left, right, 30 pixel. I got like this. Okay, from top bottom 13 pixel, from left, right, 30 pixel. I just added some style here. Okay, now this name is coming on the face of that users. So what I will do, I will just add here margin top also. Maybe I can apply some margin top value. How much we can try? Margin top. Can I try something like 100 pixel? Now I got something like this. Okay. So I don't want this name should come on their face. So that is the reason I have told something like this. Now here we are able to create something like this. Now if you want, you can just add here gap property. This gap 30 pixel. It looks like this. Okay, something like this we have built. Now same thing we have to do for grid item 2 also, grid item 3 also. Okay, so for grid item 2, okay, we have to just I'm just copying this property. I will add here. Now I just need to change the image. So I will just copy some second image, box 2 image. I will add here. Okay, no image. Yeah, here background size instead of cover, I will just add some value here. Okay, 300 pixel I will say. Let's see how it looks. So we got something like this. Okay, here we got something like URL, no repeat, center. Okay, here we need to change the values. But let's suppose, let's try cover only. We got like this. Okay. Now on this also, I want to add one shadow. So simply I will take one div. Okay, for this also, I will just add that class shadow because I want same thing, right? So here, instead of ID, can I make it like a class? And here, can I make dot? Here also dot. Here also dot. Here also dot. If I just try, let's see how it looks. I got something like this. So no need to write same CSS for this div and this div. Just we are using class attribute here. Okay, same div I want inside this grid item 3 also. Now grid item 3 also, I want same CSS. Okay, I will just copy these 3 properties or these 4 properties. I will add here. I just need to change the image URL. So I will just copy this image URL. I will paste here. Now we got something like this. Okay, so let me just decrease the size. Can we make here instead of cover 300? Let's skip this image one. Okay, you can just change some image. So let me just try here something like women's shopping images. Okay, you can just grab any image here. Maybe this image I want to grab. Okay, right click, copy image link, and you can just paste here. We got something like this. Okay, now here I want to display some content. So to display some content, I will be just using some tags here, something like H2 or something like that. Okay, I will use some like, here I want something like this. Special offer, women fashion, special offer, women fashion, or else you can just add some other content. So for this special offer, I'm taking H3. For this women fashion, I want to take something like H2. Okay, so simply I will go back to that. Here, shadow, H3, something like special offer, and H2. For H2, we can just give some other title. Okay, so let me just add women fashion only as of now. Women fashion. Same H3, H2. I want to apply here. Okay, now if I save it, it looks something like this. Now I just want some space between this special offer and women fashion. So for this H3, I can just add margin bottom, something like 15 pixel. So here I got some space. Okay, same style I can apply here as well. Maybe 12 I can try. Yeah, 12 looks better. So I will just go with 12 pixel. Okay, now we are able to design this kind of UI using our grid. Understood how to create the layouts now? Yeah, you can try. Yeah, Ravi, you can try. Understood now how to create layouts, how to use grid and flex together. See here, for this, we have used grid and flex together. Now, if I open any UI, you will be confident of creating that kind of layouts. So if you want to practice, what you guys can do, simply go to the Google and search for home page templates. Just search for home page templates. And if you go to this images tab, you will get so many templates here. See, this many templates you have. So try to take any one template and try to design according to that. Try to take any one template and try to design. Now, if I just take this template, now here we have so many templates. Now you can pick any template that you want. Now, can you create this kind of UI? One background image and one content in the center, like professional builder. And here they have one more content. We build your home, something like that. In the yellow color they have given. Now, if you take any template, you will be able to build. You will get the confidence of building it. Just go to the Ashok IT website. And now you try to analyze yourself. What are the different sections you can build? Can you build this kind of section, this section? Will you be able to build this section? Are you guys getting confidence? This section, how to build this kind of div? Like here, see, there is curve. Here also we have curve. But here we don't have curve. So for this, you have to explore a property called border hyphen top hyphen left. Border hyphen top hyphen right. Border hyphen bottom hyphen left. Border hyphen bottom hyphen right. Now these are the 4 properties. Border top left. Border top left means this part. Border top left. And just give some value like 20 pixel, 10 pixel and try. It will, your border will get curved. And here, this is the bottom right. So for that, apply this bottom right. So if you want to know about this property, what you have to do? Simply search border hyphen top hyphen left in CSS. Okay, you have so many platforms here. Pick any one platform. For example, I'm clicking this platform. So here I will find that documentation. Here I think they have added only border. Yeah, here. So this many properties we have. Related to border, see this many properties. So CSS is very huge subject. If you try to learn each and everything in CSS, minimum 3 years you require to learn CSS. That many properties are there in CSS. If you want to learn everything in CSS, then you require 3 years. Minimum 3 years you require to learn entire CSS. That many properties we have. Now see, only related to border, this many properties I have. And if I take each and every example to explain the border property, then CSS itself will take nearly 3 years for you to learn. This is just for border property. Like this, we have so many properties. See, for border, how many properties we have? Just for border. Okay, in the same way, if you guys are learning Java, so do you think that you are learning end-to-end Java? You know everything in Java. Are you learning everything in Java? No. No one can teach you everything in Java. Java is very huge language. Even the people who have 15 years of experience, they don't know complete Java. So every year, like I think now for every 6 months, they are releasing the new version of Java. Every 6 months or every year, they are releasing the new version. And in every new version, some classes will be added, some classes will be removed, right? So it's impossible to master Java. In the same way, it's impossible for you to master any technology. We cannot master. Everything you will learn just by experience. The more you will work, the more you will learn. The more research you will do, the more things you will learn about that technology. This is how the industry is there. If you ask me, do I know entire CSS? My answer will be no. No one knows entire CSS. No one knows entire HTML. No one knows entire JavaScript. I know only that much JavaScript, how much I have worked in my industry. In my projects, on how many concepts I have worked, I know only those many concepts. And same case for everyone. So tomorrow, if you guys go and work in industry for 5 years, and if someone asks you, do you know entire JavaScript? Your answer will be no. You will say, I know only those parts of JavaScript which I have worked on my projects. And maybe I know some basic concepts. Okay, so this is how we have to always, as a software engineer, we should not remember the things. We have to always go and research the things whenever you get a requirement. You have to read documentations, you have to read articles. Okay, so this is what we have to do. And in the course, what we will learn, we are going to learn minimum required things. Means you should know at least minimum things to start working on the projects. Once you enter into industry, you should know at least minimum things. So that is what we are going to learn in these courses, wherever you learn on any platform. Yeah. So that's all, guys, for today's session. So in tomorrow's session, we will start with one more topic, which is very important. That is CSS positions. Something called CSS positions. And very confusing topic also, and very important topic also. So we will study how CSS positions are used in real time, like what is that concept. All those things we are going to explore.